Mars and Venus are our closest neighbors in the solar system. If Mars is in a particularly favorable position, it is only 55.6 million kilometers away from us in its elliptical orbit. In that case, we see it as a bright red in the night sky with the naked eye. Astronomers observed strange processes on Mars as early as the 17th century. Due to the changing color and Earth-like surface textures, it was quickly hypothesized that life existed on Mars. If you like our videos, support us with a thumbs up, subscribe to Spazio, and look forward to future videos. Mars is a rocky planet, like Earth, Venus, and Mercury. Only the outer planets following Mars are gas giants. With an equatorial diameter of 6,800 kilometers, Mars is only about half the size of Earth, which has a diameter of 12,800 kilometers. In terms of composition, Mars actually resembles Earth. However, the gases on Mars are currently distributed very differently. The red planet's atmosphere is very thin, and oxygen is present only in small amounts. The thin atmosphere allows a large amount of unfiltered cosmic radiation to reach Mars. However, Mars has other striking similarities to our planet. A Martian day is 24 hours, 39 minutes, and 35,244 seconds long, almost as long as an Earth day. On Mars, there are seasons during which the climate and the thickness of the poles change. However, the seasons on Mars are twice as long. This is simply because the Martian year is 687 days long, almost twice as long as an Earth year. Mars therefore takes twice as long to complete its orbit around the Sun once. Only the Moon has been better explored than Mars. International space projects have already sent around 50 space probes to Mars. The first successful probes were NASA's Viking 1 and 2. This twin probe was launched in 1976. Viking 1 remained successfully operational until 1982. The Viking 2 probe transmitted data from Mars to Earth until 1980. The first robotic Martian to land on the surface was the Mars Pathfinder in the 1990s. More recently, the Mars Rover Opportunity from 2004 to 2019 and the Mars Rover Curiosity from 2004 to 2010 carried out research missions on our neighbor. First signs of life on Mars. Because Mars is very easy to observe when close to Earth, early astrologers noticed Martian spots. Today, we know that these are seasonal changes in the environment at Mars's poles. When the sun warms the ice caps at the beginning of spring on Mars, geysers of carbon dioxide and dark, coarse-grained dust form. These clouds first rise into the sky and then settle back onto the surface of Mars. This creates altered spots and fan-like structures. When telescopes improved significantly in the 19th century, astronomers observed the phenomenon even more clearly. At the time, the colored structures were thought to be signs of changes in vegetation zones. The idea that life on Mars was similar to that on Earth spread. In 1854, astronomer William Whewell published theories suggesting that Mars had oceans, land, and possible life forms. In 1877, the Italian astronomer Giovanni Schiaparelli recognized the Martian canals, or canali. Schiaparelli hypothesized that they were structures formed by water. Due to a translation error, the canali became the Martian canals. As a result, the idea of a human future on Mars continued to grow among the population. Some were inspired by the idea of living on Mars. Others began to fear the so-called Martians. Hysteria escalated when British author H.G. Wells published his worldwide bestseller, The War of the Worlds, in 1897. The story tells of a Martian invasion of Earth. Since then, the beliefs and superstitions surrounding life on Mars and the Martians themselves have remained etched in our minds. About 80 years later, humanity was already able to send the first unknown space probes to Mars. Naturally, Earthlings were curious to see if any of the ideas about a living Mars would come true. Before that, scientists had already attempted to establish radio contact with possible relatives on Mars. However, no response ever arrived. Finally, in July 1976, the Viking 1 mission transmitted the first images from orbit around Mars. As exploration progressed, the image of an arid, desert-like planet became more apparent than that of a world teeming with water and life. However, the probe also sent back images that offered food for thought. The highlight was the face of Mars. The rock structure in the Cydonia region of Mars actually resembled a human face. Other bizarre shapes the orbiter managed to photograph were pyramids and rectangular structures that scientists compared to the appearance of an Inca city. Evidence of artificially created buildings and monuments on Mars was sufficient reason for NASA to send the Mars Global Surveyor to Mars for a more thorough examination in 1996. Nearly 2 years later, the great disillusionment came for all ufologists and alien enthusiasts. The new high-resolution photographs showed the face of Mars from different perspectives. It was clearly visible that it was actually a shapeless rock formation. Only the viewing angle and the incidence of light created the optical illusion of a face in the first images. Other phenomena could also be explained by similar effects and the consequences of natural erosion. Nonetheless, the Mars Global Surveyor was the first spacecraft ever sent into space to study extraterrestrial life. The search for Mars continues. Although images like the one of the Martian face have repeatedly proven to be optical illusions, ufologists never tire of searching for traces of aliens on Mars. The internet is full of images, even from the most recent space probes. Sometimes paratroopers claim to have recognized the bones of a giant on Mars. And every now and then, new Martians and Martian faces appear. Is there water on Mars? But let's return to the results of renowned scientific studies. The question of whether or not there is water on Mars has puzzled researchers, as has the question of clarifying the apparent structures. It seemed clear that the Martian atmosphere was too thin to allow surface water to form. The atmospheric pressure was too low, but it was suspected that water might exist in deeper layers of rock, in the form of underground lakes or oceans. In 2010, a student accidentally found evidence of seasonal streams of liquid saltwater in Mars's Hale crater. Where this phenomenon comes from and why it appears only at certain times remains a mystery. It's possible that Mars pushes liquid upward from within as its surface heats up. So you might as well say Mars is sweating. Thanks to the European Mars Express mission, the existence of liquid water on Mars was finally demonstrated in 2018. Using ground-penetrating radar, a lake approximately 20 km wide was discovered at Mars's south pole. The liquid water, likely salty, is hidden beneath a 0.5 kilometer thick layer of ice. Using data provided by Mars Express, astronomers have reconstructed a completely new picture of Mars's past. It is believed that at least 3.6 billion years ago, the red planet had a warm and humid climate, with numerous lakes and streams. This could explain the washing out of Martian depressions and other surface features. Only later did the atmosphere disappear and Mars finally dry out. As early as the 1970s, the Viking 1 probe had provided images indicating the presence of remnants of organic structures. However, laboratory tests demonstrated that such structures could also be produced purely chemically. Of course, it's been clear for some time that neither humanoids nor other more complex life forms can exist on Mars. Researchers are currently searching for microorganisms such as single-celled organisms, primitive algae, or bacteria. After all, these life forms once formed the basis of life as we know it today on Earth. New hope has come from a rock from Mars. It reached Earth in the form of a Martian meteorite. The rock, designated ALH 84001, was found in Antarctica in 1984. It wasn't until 1996 that American researchers thought they'd found traces of fossilized bacteria on the boulder. Later, however, they were able to demonstrate that similar structures could also be created chemically. During its 6-year mission, the Curiosity rover demonstrated the existence of so-called thiophanies on Mars. These are complex organic hydrocarbons, almost always of organic origin, at least on Earth. On Earth, ring-shaped compounds are found in coal tar and petroleum. Both are clearly degradation products of organic substances. A team at the Technical University of Berlin has been working for years to identify possible pathways for the formation of thiophanies. To date, researchers can only speculate. Organic formation is certainly more likely because it is much more frequent and simple. So the traces could actually have been remnants of previous, more life-friendly conditions on Mars. However, a single chemical pathway is also conceivable. Thiophanies are also formed when sulfate-containing substances are heated to over 120 degrees Celsius. Another possibility is contamination of the Martian surface with thiophanies due to a meteorite impact. So, in the end, we can only say, once again, that we know nothing specific. However, there is growing evidence that Mars may once have been an inhabited and vegetated planet. It's plausible that several million years later, nothing remains on the surface but rocks, sand, and desert. If we look at predictions for our own Earth, scientists paint a very similar picture for the distant future. Aside from rocks and desert, not much will remain of our previous culture. Will we have moved to another planet by then? Who knows? If the sun had heated Earth to the point of making it uninhabitable, Mars or another planet might offer an alternative. What do you think? Can you imagine people living on Mars in the future or being able to fly in space? Let us know in the comments.